That was one of those still evenings you get in the summer, when you can hear a snail clear its throat a mile away. Hello everyone. I thought we should begin with a quote, because it is indeed one of those still evenings you get in the summer. I have not heard a snail clear its throat a mile away, but I dare say I probably could if I really listened. Hello everybody, welcome to Literacy. And, happy Wednesday. No, it's not Wednesday. Wow, I was just going full autopilot there. Happy Friday. Remix. Yes, happy Friday. And welcome to I Get Very Enthusiastic About P.G.Wodehouse, which is what this stream is. We are here today to give you some light entertainment, shall we say, for your ears. We have had parental guidance Wodehouse, indeed. I think it was like Peregrine something Wodehouse, possibly. I'm not entirely sure. But yes, hello everybody. Friday during Book Week, Lucy. Yes. Hello. Hello, Arian. Hello, Llama. Hello, Lynn. Hello, Andy Pants. Hello, Cat. I think there were more people. Peregrine Guillemot Wodehouse. Exactly. Oh, yes, Parola as well. Is there anyone I've missed? Probably Lady Lady Mephistopheles. That's the one. But yes, welcome. Welcome, everybody. I hope we are all doing well. I hope we have had a good week so far. I hope we have enjoyed the book week. We have certainly enjoyed it ourselves. But yeah, today, because it's a Friday and you know you're meant to have a nice evening on a Friday evening, I thought that given that Sam got to it started raining. Oh yes, apologies in advance. You might hear some thunder. There might be a possibility of the stream being taken down if I get an actual storm here, but we are forecast an actual thunderstorm. So we shall see. I don't have a surge protector on my PC, so it'll be fine. It'll be fine. Lightning is against terms of service. Yes, it is. Living dangerously. Yeah, I know, right? Hopefully it'll just be thunder rather than lightning. But yes. But yeah, because Sam got to read some sci-fi and stuff from one of his favourite authors, I thought I'd read something from one of my favourite authors, which... he's not out of copyright, but I thought it probably won't harm just for the one stream. Excuse me. I won't get into the habit, sadly, of reading P.G.Wodehouse on stream, even though he is wonderful and again, a bit like Dickens, an absolute delight to read out loud. So for those of you who do not know who P.G.Wodehouse is, P.G.Wodehouse was a British author who I believe, when was he born? Actually, I've got dates in this book. I've got his anthology here. Get me, I'm such a nerd. Skippity-doo. Boop. Yes, I think he was born in. When was he born? 1881. His actual name, Pelham Grenville Wodehouse. An excellent name. But born in 1881. And yeah, he is a fascinating man in that he was put in a prisoner of war camp at one point because basically people thought that his works were coded. They weren't. And he had a really hard time actually later in his life. But he was absolutely devoted, I believe, to his wife. He had an adopted daughter. He was just generally a really decent guy, which is very rare for certainly authors of this time and also of the kind of genre that Wodehouse is, because P.G.Wodehouse is satire. He is the author that you will absolutely hear echoes of in Pratchett, for example. He had an absolute fondness for the British upper class, the British aristocracy, but a fondness in a kind of, these guys are completely useless, what are they even doing with their lives kind of way. There is a sort of gentle poking fun at sort of the ridiculous kind of protocol of the upper class and the unnecessary frivolities of them, which again it's one of those he's one of those authors that he's humorous, there is a biting satire underneath the humour, but he's not doing it with any intent to kind of harm, which is one of the many reasons I absolutely adore Wodehouse. But for those of you who may have heard of him, you will know him most likely from his Jeeves series, Jeeves and Wooster being the Fry and Laurie TV series adaptation back in the, God, I don't actually know when was that? Sam might know. But and pretty much I think everybody who is a Wodehouse fan agrees that Hugh Laurie and Stephen Fry are like the perfect Bertie and Jeeves. But yes, that is in general a sort of a general overview of P.G. Wodehouse. He's annoying in that he is still in copyright because he died at the age of 93. That's just rude. Authors aren't meant to live that long. How dare he? If he died earlier, then I would be able to read it more often. Also, he had Madame Tussauds waxwork. Didn't know that. I'm just reading off his list of stuff. But yes, he is famous for creating such wonderful characters as Bertie Wooster and Jeeves, his valet, and has a turn of phrase that is immensely quotable, absolutely immensely quotable. You wish someone would remake that. You can't see Fry without being angry. Smug. Yeah. No, I'm kind of with you on that, but also for that, I genuinely can't see anybody else as Jeeves, which is annoying, but like I feel like you can appreciate it as is without necessarily thinking about the people involved. Again, it's art from artist, isn't it? But yes. Also, hello, Wanda Asima. Welcome in. But yeah, I can't think if anyone has any ideas. Like I've been trying to rack my brains who would be a good Bertie and a good Jeeves, sort of modern day actors. Well, modern day actors, actors who are younger nowadays. I still don't think anybody but Hugh Laurie can be Bertie Wooster. He is, in my eyes, he is like how I see Bertie, just a complete buffoon. But yes, I thought I might read you, because his short stories, his short stories are quite nice and short, and I thought, well, I can probably get one of them in for a stream. So what I might do is read you one of his short stories, one of the Jeeves and Wooster collection, I guess. Tennant and Sheen would do a pretty good job. No, I don't know. I imagine they could give it a pretty good go. I can see that, but I feel like the accent might be a little bit difficult. Tennant as Jeeves? No, Tennant is not a Jeeves. This is the thing, I can both see them as Bertie. I cannot see Tennant as Jeeves. Sheen could absolutely be a very good bumbling Bertie. He absolutely could, I agree. Although both of them are kind of too old, because both Jeeves and Bertie in the books are actually like 20s, I think. Sheen could absolutely do a good Bertie, but I think also Tennant could. It's difficult. Get Alum and Cumberbatch back together. Oh, and Finnemore. Oh. Yeah, actually, that's a good point. That's a very good point. Cumberbatch. Yeah, a young Cumberbatch as Bertie and a younger Roger Allam as Jeeves would be very good. Although the problem with Roger Allam is Jeeves doesn't always say everything sarcastically, and unfortunately for Roger Allam, he's just got one of those voices. And that might just be me because I've listened to a lot of Cabin Pressure, but I can't hear a lot of... I mean, he's a fantastic actor, he can do everything, but I can't hear anything but Douglas from Cabin Pressure sarcastically saying everything. Cabin Pressure is indeed always good. For anyone who hasn't heard Cabin Pressure, it's kind of similar vibes to Wodehouse, honestly. Written by the wonderful John Finnemore. Radio play, I guess. Radio drama. I can't remember how many seasons it had. Yeah, a fantastic cast. You can see Cabbage Patch and John Finnemore, though. Yeah, I can see that. Actually, yeah, good point. Cumberbatch might be a good Jeeves. And I mean, John Finnemore plays the bumbling fool in Arthur in Cabin Pressure incredibly well. So I can see that. They went through the whole alphabet in Cabin Pressure. Did they actually? Gosh. Yeah, it was 26 episodes, wasn't it? There's me suddenly realising, how many letters does the alphabet have? But yes. Anyway, we're not talking about Cabin Pressure. We're talking about P.G.Wodehouse. So I shall read you to start, and then we should probably just have a chat. I will probably flick through some bits because again, I don't want to read lots of his. I don't want to read like a couple of his short stories like Sam did with the sci-fi the other day because, yeah, he's not in copyright. I don't want to take the mick. Cabin Pressure is technically on topic with it being a comedy. Comedy, yes, indeed. But yes, I don't want to take the mick and do too much of this. But I also have a long list of my favourite quotes. So we might just do some snappy one-liners after I have read this. But I shall read you a short story of his first of all. For any context, I guess you don't really need context, but context of this: Bertie Wooster is young guy. I think both of his parents, he's an orphan, I think, and has far too much money. And he has a valet called Jeeves who basically sorts his whole life out for him because Bertie is an absolute mess. And Bertie has two aunts. I think he only has two aunts. I think it's two aunts. He has Aunt Agatha, who I think the quote is something like chews broken bottles and howls at the full moon. And Aunt Dahlia, who is his favourite aunt, who is basically like a hunting party in one woman. And her voice can be heard in several counties away. So I think that's pretty much all the context you need. But I'm gonna channel my inner Brian Laurie for this. Yeah, I do hope you enjoy. This is The Love That Purifies by P.G.Wodehouse. There is a ghastly moment in the year, generally about the beginning of August, when Jeeves insists on taking a holiday, the slacker, and legs it off to some seaside resort for a couple of weeks, leaving me stranded. This moment had now arrived, and we were discussing what was to be done with the young master. "I had gathered the impression, sir," said Jeeves, "that you were proposing to accept Mr. Sipperley's invitation to join him at his Hampshire residence." I laughed. One of those bitter, rasping ones. "Correct, Jeeves. I was. But mercifully I was enabled to discover young Sippy's foul plot in time. Do you know what?" "No, sir." "My spies informed me that Sippy's fiancée, Miss Moon, was to be there. Also his fiancée's mother, Mrs. Moon, and his fiancée's small brother, Master Moon. You see the hideous treachery lurking behind the invitation? You see the man's loathsome design? Obviously my job was to be the task of keeping Mrs. Moon and little Sebastian Moon interested and amused, while Sippy and his blighted girl went off for the day, roaming the pleasant woodlands and talking of this and that. I doubt if anyone has ever had a narrower escape. You remember little Sebastian?" "Yes, sir."
his goggle eyes, his golden curls.
Yes, sir.
I don't know why it is, but I've never been able to bear with fortitude anything in the shape of a kid with golden curls. Confronted with one, I feel the urge to step on him or drop things on him from a height.
Many strong natures are affected in the same way, sir.
So, no shay sippy for me. Was that the front doorbell ringing?
Yes, sir.
Somebody stands without.
Yes, sir.
Better go and see who it is.
Yes, sir.
He oozed off, to return a moment later bearing a telegram. I opened it, and a soft smile played about the lips. Amazing how often things happen as if on a cue, Jeeves. This is from my Aunt Dahlia, inviting me down to her place in Worcestershire.
Most satisfactory, sir.
Yes. How I came to overlook her when searching for a haven, I can't think. The ideal home from home, picturesque surroundings, company's own water and the best cook in England. You have not forgotten Anatole?
No, sir.
And above all, Jeeves, at Aunt Dahlia's there should be an almost total shortage of blasted kids. True, there is her son Bonzo, who I take it will be home for the holidays, but I don't mind Bonzo. Buzz off and send a wire accepting.
Yes, sir.
And then shove a few necessaries together, including golf clubs and tennis racket.
Very good, sir. I'm glad that matters have been so happily adjusted.
I think I have mentioned before that my Aunt Dahlia stands alone in the grim regiment of my aunts as a real good sort and a chirpy sportsman. She is the one, if you remember, who married old Tom Travers, and with the assistance of Jeeves, lured Mrs. Bingo Little's French cook, Anatole, away from Mrs. B.L. and into her own employment. To visit her is always a pleasure. She generally has some cheery birds staying with her, and there is none of that rot about getting up for breakfast which one is sadly apt to find at country houses. It was, accordingly, with unalloyed lightness of heart that I edged the two-seater into the garage at Brinkley Court, Worcestershire, and strolled round to the house by way of the shrubbery and the tennis lawn to report arrival. I had just got across the lawn when a head poked itself out of the smoking-room window and beamed at me in an amiable sort of way. "Ah, Mr. Worcester," it said. "Ha-ha!" "Ho-ho!" I replied, not to be outdone in the courtesies. It had taken me a couple of seconds to place this head. I now perceived that it belonged to a rather moth-eaten septuagenarian of the name of Anstruther, an old friend of Aunt Dahlia's late father. I had met him at her house in London once or twice. An agreeable cove, but somewhat given to nervous breakdowns. "Just arrived?" he asked, beaming as before. "This minute," I said, also beaming. "I fancy you will find our good hostess in the drawing-room." "Right," I said, and after a bit more beaming to and fro, I pushed on. Aunt Dahlia was in the drawing-room, and welcomed me with gratifying enthusiasm. She beamed too. It was one of those big days for beamers. "Hello, ugly," she said. "So here you are. Thank heaven you were able to come." It was the right tone, and one I should be glad to hear in others of the family circle, notably my Aunt Agatha. "Always a pleasure to enjoy your hosp, Aunt Dahlia," I said cordially. "I anticipate a delightful and restful visit. I see you've got Mr. Anstruther staying here. Anybody else?" "Do you know Lord Snettisham?" "I've met him racing." "He's here, and Lady Snettisham." "And Bonzo, of course?" "Yes, and Thomas." "Uncle Thomas?" "No, he's in Scotland. Your cousin Thomas." "You don't mean Aunt Agatha's loathless son?" "Of course I do. How many cousin Thomases do you think you've got, fathead? Agatha has gone to Homburg and planted the child on me." I was visibly agitated. "But, Aunt Dahlia, do you realise what you've taken on? Have you an inkling of the sort of scourge you've introduced into your home? In the society of young Thos, strong men quail. He is England's premier fiend in human shape. There is no devilry beyond his scope. That's what I have always gathered from the form book, agreed the relative. But just now, curse him, he's behaving like something out of a Sunday school story. You see, poor old Mr. Anstruther is very frail these days, and when he found he was in a house containing 2 small boys, he acted promptly. He offered a prize of £5 to whichever behaved best during his stay. The consequence is that, ever since, Thomas has had large white wings sprouting out of his shoulders. A shadow seemed to pass across her face. She appeared embittered. "Mercenary little brute," she said. "I never saw such a sickeningly well-behaved kid in my life. It's enough to make one despair of human nature." I couldn't follow her. "But isn't that all to the good?" "No, it's not." "I can't see why. Surely a smug, oily Thos about the house is better than a Thos raging hither and thither and being a menace to society. Stands to reason." "It doesn't stand to anything of the kind. You see, Bertie, this good conduct prize has made matters a little complex. There are wheels within wheels. The thing stirred Jane Snettisham's sporting blood to such an extent that she insisted on having a bet on the result." A great light shone upon me. I got what she was driving at. "Ah," I said. "Now I follow. Now I see. Now I comprehend. She's betting on Thos, is she?" "Yes. And naturally, knowing him, I thought the thing was in the bag. Of course. I couldn't see myself losing. Heaven knows I have no illusions about my darling Bonzo. Bonzo is, and has been from the cradle, a pest. But to back him to win a good conduct contest with Thomas seemed to me simply money for jam." "Absolutely. When it comes to devilry, Bonzo is just a good ordinary selling plater, whereas Thomas is a classic yearling." "Exactly. I don't see that you have any cause to worry, Aunt Dahlia. Thos can't last. He's bound to crack." "Yes, but before that, the mischief may be done." "Mischief?" "Yes. There is dirty work afoot, Bertie," said Aunt Dahlia gravely. "When I booked this bet, I reckoned without the hideous blackness of the Snettisham souls. Only yesterday it came to my knowledge that Jack Snettisham had been urging Bonzo to climb on the roof and boo down Mr. Anstruther's chimney." "No." "Yes. Mr. Anstruther is very frail, poor old fellow, and it would have frightened him into a fit. On coming out of which, his first action would have been to disqualify Bonzo and declare Thomas the winner by default." "But Bonzo did not boo." "No," said Aunt Dahlia, and a mother's pride rang in her voice. "He firmly refused to boo. Mercifully, he is in love at the moment, and it has quite altered his nature. He scorned the tempter." "In love? Who with?" "Lillian Gish. We had an old film of hers at the Bijou Dream in the village a week ago, and Bonzo saw her for the first time. He came out with a pale, set face, and ever since has been trying to lead a better, finer life. So the peril was averted." "That's good." "Yes, but now it's my turn. You don't suppose I am going to take a thing like that lying down, do you? Treat me right and I am fairness itself, but try any of this nobbling of starters and I can play that game too. If this good conduct contest is to be run on rough lines, I can do my bit as well as anyone. Far too much hangs on the issue for me to handicap myself by remembering the lessons I learned at my mother's knee." "Lot of money involved?" "Much more than mere money. I've betted Anatole against Jane Snettisham's kitchen maid." "Great Scott! Uncle Thomas will have something to say if he comes back and finds Anatole gone. And won't he say it? Pretty long odds you gave her, didn't you? I mean, Anatole is famed far and wide as a hash-slinger without peer. Well, Jane Snettishem's kitchen maid is not to be sneezed at. She is very hot stuff, they tell me, and good kitchen maids nowadays are about as rare as original Holbeins. Besides, I had to give her a shade the best of the odds. She stood out for it. Well, anyway, to get back to what I was saying, if the opposition are going to place temptations in Bonzo's path, they shall jolly well be placed in Thomas's path too, and plenty of them. So ring for Jeeves and let him get his brain working. But I haven't brought Jeeves. You haven't brought Jeeves? No, he always takes his holiday at this time of year. He's down at Bognor for the shrimping. Aunt Dahlia registered deep concern. Then send for him at once. What earthly use do you suppose you are without Jeeves, you poor ditherer? I drew myself up a trifle. In fact, to my full height. Nobody has a greater respect for Jeeves than I have, but the Worcester pride was stung. Jeeves isn't the only one with brains, I said coldly. Leave this thing to me, Aunt Dahlia. By dinner-time tonight I shall hope to have a fully matured scheme to submit for your approval. If I can't thoroughly encompass this thos, I'll eat my hat. About all you'll get to eat if Anatole leaves, said Aunt Dahlia in a pessimistic manner which I did not like to see. I was brooding pretty tensely as I left the presence. I have always had a suspicion that Aunt Dahlia, while invariably matey and bononymous and seeming to take pleasure in my society, has a lower opinion of my intelligence than I quite like. Too often it is her practice to address me as fathead, and if I put forward any little thought or idea or fancy in her hearing, it is apt to be greeted with the affectionate but jarring guffaw. In our recent interview, she had hinted quite plainly that she considered me negligible in a crisis which, like the present one, called for initiative and resource. It was my intention to show her how greatly she had underestimated me. To let you see the sort of fellow I really am, I got a ripe, excellent idea before I had gone halfway down the corridor. I examined it for the space of 1.5 cigarettes, and could see no flaw in it. Provided old Mr. Anstruther's notion of what constituted bad conduct squared with mine. The great thing on these occasions, as Jeeves will tell you, is to get a toehold on the psychology of the individual. Study the individual, and you will bring home the bacon. Now, I had been studying young Thos for years, and I knew his psychology from caviar to nuts. He is one of those kids who never let the sun go down on their wrath, if you know what I mean. I mean to say, do something to annoy or offend or upset this juvenile thug, and he will proceed at the earliest possible to wreak a hideous vengeance upon you. Only the previous summer, for instance, it having been drawn to his attention that the latter had reported him for smoking, he had marooned a cabinet minister on an island in the lake at Aunt Agatha's place in Hertfordshire. In the rain, mark you, and with no company but that of one of the nastiest-minded swans I have ever encountered. Well, I mean. So now it seemed to me that a few well-chosen taunts or jibes, directed at his more sensitive points, must infallibly induce in this Thos a frame of mind which would lead to his working some sensational violence upon me. And if you wonder that I was willing to sacrifice myself to this frightful extent in order to do Aunt Dahlia a bit of good, I can only say that we Worcesters are like that. The one point that seemed to me to want a spot of clearing up was this. Viz., would old Mr. Anstruther consider an outrage perpetrated on the person of Bertram Wooster a crime sufficiently black to cause him to rule Thos out of the race? Or would he just give a senile chuckle and mumble something about boys being boys? Because if the latter, the thing was off. I decided to have a word with the old boy and make sure. He was still in the smoking room, looking very frail over the morning Times. I got to the point at once. "Oh, Mr. Anstruther," I said. "What-o?" "I don't like the way the American market is shaping," he said. "I don't like this strong bear movement." "No?" I said. "Well, be that as it may, about this good conduct prize of yours." "Ah, you have heard of that, eh?" I don't quite understand how you are doing the judging." "No? Oh, it is very simple. I have a system of daily marks. At the beginning of each day I accord the 2 lads 20 marks apiece. These are subject to withdrawal, either in small or large quantities, according to the magnitude of the offence. To take a simple example, shouting outside my bedroom in the early morning would involve a loss of 3 marks. Whistling, 2. The penalty for a more serious lapse would be correspondingly greater. Before retiring to rest at night, I record the day's marks in my little book. Simple, but I think ingenious, Mr. Wooster." "Absolutely." "So far the result has been extremely gratifying. Neither of the little fellows has lost a single mark, and my nervous system is acquiring a tone which, when I learned that 2 lads of immature years would be staying in the house during my visit, I confess I had not dared to anticipate." "I see," I said. "Great work. And how do you react to what I might call general moral turpitude?"
"I beg your pardon?"
"Well, I mean when the thing doesn't affect you personally. Suppose one of them did something to me, for instance, set a booby trap or something, or shall we say, put a toad or so in my bed." He seemed shocked at the very idea. "I would certainly in such circumstances deprive the culprit of a full 10 marks. "Only 10? 15, then." 20 is a nice round number." "Well, possibly even 20. I have a peculiar horror of practical joking." "Me too." "You will not fail to advise me, Mr. Wooster, should such an outrage occur." "You shall have the news before anyone," I assured him. And so out into the garden, ranging to and fro in quest of young Thos. I knew where I was now. Bertram's feet were on solid ground. I hadn't been hunting long before I found him in the summer-house, reading an improving book. "Hello," he said, smiling a saint-like smile. This scourge of humanity was a chunky kid whom a too indulgent public had allowed to infest the country for a matter of 14 years. His nose was snub, his eyes green, his general aspect that of one studying to be a gangster. I had never liked his looks much, and with a saint-like smile added to them, they became ghastly to a degree. I ran over in my mind a few assorted taunts. "Well, young Thos," I said, "so there you are. You're getting as fat as a pig." It seemed as good an opening as any other. Experience had taught me that if there was a subject on which he was unlikely to accept persiflage in a spirit of amused geniality, it was this matter of his bulging tum. On the last occasion when I made a remark of this nature, he had replied to me, child though he was, in terms which I would have been proud to have had in my own vocabulary. But now, though a sort of wistful gleam did flit for a moment into his eyes, he merely smiled in a more saint-like manner than ever. "Yes, I think I have been putting on a little weight," he said gently. "I must try and exercise a lot while I'm here. "Won't you sit down, Bertie?" he asked, rising. "You must be tired after your journey. I'll get you a cushion. Have you cigarettes and matches? I could bring you some from the smoking room. Would you like me to fetch you something to drink?" It is not too much to say that I felt baffled. In spite of what Aunt Dahlia had told me, I don't think that until this moment I had really believed there could have been anything in the nature of a genuinely sensational change in this young plug-ugly's attitude towards his fellows. But now, hearing him talk as if he were a combination of Boy Scout and delivery wagon, I felt definitely baffled. However, I stuck at it in the old bulldog way. "Are you still at that rotten kids' school of yours?" I asked. He might have been proof against jibes at his embonpoint, but it seemed to me incredible that he could have sold himself for gold so completely as to lie down under taunts directed at his school. I was wrong. The money lust evidently held him in its grip. He merely shook his head. "I left this term. I'm going to Pevenhurst next term." "They wear mortar boards there, don't they?" "Yes." "With pink tassels?" "Yes." "What a priceless ass you'll look," I said, but without much hope, and I laughed heartily. "I expect I shall," he said, and laughed still more heartily. "Mortar boards! Ha 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 ha! Pink tassels! Ha ha!" I gave the thing up. "Well, teff, I said moodily and withdrew. A couple of days later, I realised that the virus had gone even deeper than I had thought. The kid was irredeemably sordid. It was old Mr. Anstruther who sprang the bad news. "Oh, Mr. Wooster," he said, meeting me on the stairs as I came down after a refreshing breakfast. "You were good enough to express an interest in this little prize for good conduct which I am offering." "Oh, ah?" "I explained to you my system of marking, I believe. Well, this morning I was impelled to vary it somewhat. The circumstances seemed to me to demand it. I happened to encounter our hostess's nephew, the boy Thomas, returning to the house, his aspect somewhat weary, it appeared to me, and travel-stained. I inquired of him where he had been at that early hour. It was not yet breakfast time, and he replied that he had heard you mention overnight a regret that you had omitted to order the Sporting Times to be sent to you before leaving London, and he had actually walked all the way to the railway station, a distance of more than 3 miles, to procure it for you." The old boy swam before my eyes. He looked like 2 old Mr. Anstruthers, both flickering at the edges. "What?" "I can understand your emotion, Mr. Wooster. I can appreciate it. It is indeed rarely that one encounters such unselfish kindliness in a lad of his age. So genuinely touched was I by the goodness of heart which the episode showed that I have deviated from my original system and awarded the little fellow a bonus of 15 marks. 15? On second thoughts, I shall make it 20. That, as you yourself suggested, is a nice round number." He doddered away, and I bounded off to find Aunt Dahlia. "Aunt Dahlia," I said, "matters have taken a sinister turn." "You bet your Sunday spats they have," agreed Aunt Dahlia emphatically. "Do you know what happened just now? That crook Snettisham, who ought to be warned off the turf and hounded out of his clubs, offered Bonzo 10 shillings if he would burst a paper bag behind Mr. Anstruther's chair at breakfast. Thank heaven the love of a good woman triumphed again. My sweet Bonzo merely looked at him and walked away in a marked manner. But it just shows you what we are up against." "We are up against worse than that, Aunt Dahlia," I said, and I told her what had happened. She was stunned, aghast, you might call it. "Thomas did that? Thos in person? Walked 6 miles to get you a paper? 6 miles and a bit. The young hound! Good heavens, Bertie, do you realise that he may go on doing these acts of kindness daily, perhaps twice a day? Is there no way of stopping him? None that I can think of. No, Aunt Dahlia, I must confess it. I am baffled. There is only one thing to do. We must send for Jeeves. And about time, said the relative churlishly. He ought to have been here from the start. Wire him this morning. There is good stuff in Jeeves. His heart is in the right place. The acid test does not find him wanting. Many men in his position, summoned back by a telegram in the middle of their annual vacation, might have cut up rough a bit. But not Jeeves. On the following afternoon he blew, looking bronzed and fit, and I gave him the scenario without delay. So, there you have it, Jeeves, I said, having sketched out the facts. The problem is one that will exercise your intelligence to the utmost. Rest now, and tonight, after a light repast, withdraw to some solitary place and get down to it. Is there any particularly stimulating food or beverage you would like for dinner? Anything that you feel would give the old brain just that extra fillip? If so, name it. Thank you very much, sir, but I have already hit upon a plan which should, I fancy, prove effective. I gazed at the man with some awe. Already? Yes, sir. Not already? Yes, sir. Something to do with the psychology of the individual? Precisely, sir. I shook my head, a bit discouraged. Doubts had begun to creep in. Well, spring it, Jeeves, I said, but I have not much hope. Having only just arrived, you cannot possibly be aware of the frightful change that has taken place in young Thos. You are probably building on your knowledge of him when last seen. Useless, Jeeves. Stirred by the prospect of getting his hooks on 5 of the best, this blighted boy has become so dashed virtuous that his armour seems to contain no chink. I mocked at his waistline and sneered at his school, and he merely smiled in a pale, dying duck sort of way. Well, that'll show you. However, let us hear what you have to suggest. It occurred to me, sir, that the most judicious plan in the circumstances would be for you to request Mrs. Travers to invite Master Sebastian Moon here for a short visit. I shook the onion again. The scheme sounded to me like apple sauce, and grade A apple sauce at that. What earthly good would that do? I asked, not without a touch of asperity. Why Sebastian Moon? He has golden curls, sir. What of it? The strongest natures are sometimes not proof against long golden curls. Well, it was a thought, of course. But I can't say I was leaping about to any great extent. It might be that the sight of Sebastian Moon would break down Thos's iron self-control to the extent of causing him to inflict mayhem on the person, but I wasn't any too hopeful. It may be so, Jeeves. I do not think I am too sanguine, sir. You must remember that Master Moon, apart from his curls, has a personality which is not uniformly pleasing. He is apt to express himself with a breezy candour which I fancy Master Thomas might feel inclined to resent in one some years his junior. I had had a feeling all along that there was a flaw somewhere, and now it seemed to me that I had spotted it. But, Jeeves, granted that little Sebastian is the pot of poison you indicate, why won't he act just as forcibly on young Bonzo as on Thos? Pretty silly we should look if our nominees started putting it across him. Never forget that already Bonzo is 20 marks down and falling back in the betting. I do not anticipate any such contingencies, sir. Master Travers is in love, and love is a very powerful restraining influence at the age of 13. I mused. Well, we can but try, Jeeves. Yes, sir. I'll get Aunt Dahlia to write to Sippy tonight. I'm bound to say that the spectacle of little Sebastian when he arrived 2 days later did much to remove pessimism from my outlook. If ever there was a kid whose whole appearance seemed to call aloud to any right-minded boy to lure him into a quiet spot and inflict violence upon him, that kid was undeniably Sebastian Moon. He reminded me strongly of little Lord Fauntleroy. I marked young Thoss's demeanour closely at the moment of their meeting, and, unless I was much mistaken, there came into his eyes the sort of look which would come into those of an Indian chief, Chinakuk, let's say, or Sitting Bull, just before he started reaching for his scalping knife. He had the air of one who was about ready to begin. True, his manner as he shook hands was guarded. Only a keen observer could have detected that he was stirred to his depths. But I had seen, and I summoned Jeeves forthwith. Jeeves, I said, if I appeared to think poorly of that scheme of yours, I now withdraw my remarks. I believe you have found the way. I was noticing Thoss at the moment of impact. His eyes had a strange gleam. Indeed, sir? He shifted uneasily on his feet, and his ears wiggled. He had, in short, the appearance of a boy who was holding himself in with an effort almost too great for his frail body. Yes, sir? Yes, Jeeves. I received a distinct impression of something being on the point of exploding. Tomorrow I shall ask Aunt Dahlia to take the 2 warts for a country ramble, to lose them in some sequestered spot, and to leave the rest to nature. It is a good idea, sir. It is more than a good idea, Jeeves, I said. It is a pip. You know, the older I get, the more firmly do I become convinced that there is no such thing as a pip in existence. Again and again have I seen the apparently sure thing go thut, and now it is rarely indeed that I can be lured from my aloof scepticism. Fellows come sidling up to me at the drones and elsewhere, urging me to invest on some horse that can't lose even if it gets struck by lightning at the starting post, but Bertram Wooster shakes his head. He has seen too much of life to be certain of anything. If anyone had told me that my cousin Thoss, left alone for an extended period of time with a kid of the superlative foulness of Sebastian Moon, would not only refrain from cutting off his curls with a pocket-knife and chasing him across country into a muddy pond, but would actually return home carrying the gruesome kid on his back because he had got a blister on his foot, I would have laughed scornfully. I knew Thoss. I knew his work. I had seen him in action. And I was convinced that not even the prospect of collecting £5 would be enough to give him pause. And yet, what happened? In the quiet, even fall, when the little birds were singing their sweetest and all nature seemed to whisper of hope and happiness, the blow fell. I was chatting with old Mr. Anstruther on the terrace, when suddenly round a bend in the drive the 2 kids hove in view. Sebastian, seated on Thoss's back, his hat off and his golden curls floating on the breeze, was singing as much as he could remember of a comic song, and Thoss, bowed down by the burden but carrying on gamely, was trudging along, smiling that bally saint-like smile of his. He parked the kid on the front steps and came across to us. Sebastian got a nail in his shoe, he said in a low, virtuous voice. It hurt him to walk, so I gave him a piggyback. I heard old Mr. Anstruther draw in his breath sharply. All the way home? Yes, sir. In this hot sunshine? Yes, sir. But was he not heavy? He was a little, sir, said Thos, uncorking the saint-like once more, but it would have hurt him awfully to walk. I pushed off. I had had enough. If ever a septuagenarian looked on the point of handing out another bonus, that septuagenarian was old Mr. Anstruther. He had the unmistakable bonus glitter in his eye. I withdrew, and found Jeeves in my bedroom, messing about with ties and things. He pursed the lips a bit on hearing the news.
Serious, sir?
Very serious, Jeeves.
I had feared this, sir.
Had you? I hadn't. I was convinced Thos would have massacred young Sebastian. I banked on it. It just shows what the greed for money will do. This is a commercial age, Jeeves. When I was a boy, I would have cheerfully have forfeited £5 in order to deal faithfully with a kid like Sebastian. I would have considered it money well spent.
You are mistaken, sir, in your estimate of the motives actuating Master Thomas. It was not a mere desire to win £5 that caused him to curb his natural impulses.
Eh?
I have ascertained the true reason for his change of heart, sir.
I felt fogged. Religion, Jeeves?
No, sir. Love.
Love?
Yes, sir. The young gentleman confided in me during a brief conversation in the hall shortly after luncheon. We had been speaking for a while on neutral subjects, when he suddenly turned a deeper shade of pink, and after some slight hesitation inquired of me if I did not think Miss Greta Garbo the most beautiful woman at present in existence.
I clutched the brow. Jeeves, don't tell me Thos is in love with Greta Garbo.
Yes, sir. Unfortunately, such is the case. He gave me to understand that it had been coming on for some time, and her last picture settled the issue. His voice shook with an emotion which it was impossible to misread. I gathered from his observations, sir, that he proposes to spend the remainder of his life trying to make himself worthy of her.
It was a knockout. This was the end. This is the end, Jeeves, I said. Bonzo must be a good 40 marks behind by now. Only some sensational and spectacular outrage upon the public weal on the part of young Thos could have enabled him to wipe out the lead. And of that there is now apparently no chance.
The eventuality does appear remote, sir.
I brooded. Uncle Thomas will have a fit when he comes back and finds Anatole gone.
Yes, sir.
Aunt Dahlia will drain the bitter cup to the dregs.
Yes, sir.
And speaking from a purely selfish point of view, the finest cooking I have ever bitten will pass out of my life forever, unless the Snettishams invite me in some night to take pot luck. And that eventuality is also remote.
Yes, sir.
Then the only thing I can do is to square the shoulders and face the inevitable.
Yes, sir.
Like some aristocrat of the French Revolution popping into the tumbril, what? The brave smile, the stiff upper lip.
Yes, sir.
Righto, then. Is the shirt studded?
Yes, sir.
The tie chosen?
Yes, sir.
The collar and evening underwear all in order?
Yes, sir.
Then I'll have a bath and be with you in 2 ticks. It is all very well to talk about the brave smile and the stiff upper lip, but in my experience, and I dare say others have found the same, is that they are a dashed sight easier to talk about than to actually fix on the face. For the next few days, I'm bound to admit, I found myself, in spite of every effort, registering gloom pretty consistently. For, as if to make things tougher than they might have been, Anatole at this juncture suddenly developed a cooking streak which put all his previous efforts in the shade. Night after night we sat at the dinner table, the food melting in our mouths, and Aunt Dahlia would look at me, and I would look at Aunt Dahlia, and the male Snettisham would ask the female Snettisham in a ghastly, gloating sort of way if she had ever tasted such cooking, and the female Snettisham would smirk at the male Snettisham and say she had never had in all her puff, and I would look at Aunt Dahlia, and Aunt Dahlia would look at me, and our eyes would be full of unshed tears, if you know what I mean. And all the time old Mr. Anstruther's visit drawing to a close, the sands running out, so to speak. And then, on the very last afternoon of his stay, the thing happened. It was one of those warm, drowsy, peaceful afternoons. I was up in my bedroom, getting off a spot of correspondence which I had neglected of late, and from where I sat I looked down on the shady lawn, fringed with its gay flower beds. There was a bird or two hopping about, a butterfly or so fluttering to and fro, an assortment of bees buzzing hither and thither. In a garden chair sat old Mr. Anstruther, getting his 8 hours. It was a sight which, had I had less on my mind, would no doubt have soothed the old soul a bit. The only blot on the landscape was Lady Snettisham, walking among the flower beds and probably sketching out future menus, curse her. And so for a time everything carried on. The birds hopped, the butterflies fluttered, the bees buzzed, and old Mr. Anstruther snored, all in accordance with the programme. And I worked through a letter to my tailor to the point where I proposed to say something pretty strong about the way the right sleeve of my last coat bagged. There was a tap on the door, and Jeeves entered, bringing the second post. I laid the letters listlessly on the table beside me. "Well, Jeeves," I said sombrely. "Sir?" "Mr. Anstruther leaves tomorrow." "Yes, sir." I gazed down at the sleeping septuagenarian. "In my young days, Jeeves," I said, "however much I might have been in love, I could never have resisted the spectacle of an old gentleman asleep like that in a deck chair. I would have done something to him, no matter what the cost." "Indeed, sir?" "Yes, probably with a pea-shooter. But the modern boy is degenerate. He has lost his vim. I suppose young Thos is indoors on this lovely afternoon, showing Sebastian his stamp album or something. Ta! I said, and I said it rather nastily. "I fancy Master Thomas and Master Sebastian are playing in the stable yard, sir. I encountered Master Sebastian not long back, and he informed me he was on his way thither." "The motion pictures, Jeeves," I said, "are the curse of the age. But for them, if Thos had found himself alone in a stable yard with a kid like Sebastian—" I broke off. From some point to the southwest, out of my line of vision, there had proceeded a piercing squeal. It cut through the air like a knife, and old Mr. Anstruther leaped up as if it had run into the fleshy part of his leg. And the next moment little Sebastian appeared, going well, and followed at a short interval by Thos, who was going even better. In spite of the fact that he was hampered in his movements by a large stable bucket which he bore in his right hand, Thos was running a great race. He had almost come up with Sebastian when the latter, with great presence of mind, dodged behind Mr. Anstruther, and there for a moment the matter rested. But only for a moment. Thos, for some reason plainly stirred to the depths of his being, moved adroitly to one side, and, poising the bucket for an instant, discharged its contents. And Mr. Anstruther, who had just moved to the same side, received, as far as I could gather from a distance, the entire consignment. In 1 second, without any previous training or upbringing, he had become the wettest man in Worcestershire. "Jeeves!" I cried. "Yes, indeed, sir," said Jeeves, and seemed to me to put the whole thing in a nutshell. Down below, things were hotting up nicely. Old Mr. Anstruther may have been frail, but he undoubtedly had his moments. I have rarely seen a man of his years conduct himself with such a lissom abandon. There was a stick lying beside the chair, and with this in hand he went into action like a 2-year-old. A moment later he and Thos had passed out of the picture round the side of the house. Thos cutting out a rare pace, but, judging from the sounds of anguish, not quite good enough to distance the field. The tumult and the shouting died, and after gazing for a while with considerable satisfaction at the Snettisham, who was standing there with a sandbagged look, watching her nominee pass right out of the betting, I turned to Jeeves. I felt quietly triumphant. It is not often that I score off him, but now I had scored in no uncertain manner. "You see, Jeeves," I said, "I was right and you were wrong. Blood will tell. Once a Thos, always a Thos. Can the leopard change his spots, or whatever? What was that thing they used to teach us at school about expelling nature?"
"You may expel nature with a pitchfork, sir, but she will always return. In the original Latin—"
"Never mind about the original Latin. The point is that I told you Thos could not resist those curls, and he couldn't. You would have it that he could."
"I do not fancy it was the curls that caused the upheaval, sir."
"Must have been."
"No, sir. I think Master Sebastian had been speaking disparagingly of Miss Garbo."
"They? Why would he do that?"
"I suggested that he should do so, sir, not long ago when I encountered him on his way to the stable-yard. It was a move which he was very willing to take, as he informed me that in his opinion Miss Garbo was definitely inferior, both in beauty and talent, to Miss Clara Bow, for whom he has long nourished a deep regard. From what we have just witnessed, sir, I imagine that Master Sebastian must have introduced the topic into the conversation at an early point." I sank into a chair. The Worcester system can stand just so much.
"Jeeves."
"Sir?"
"You tell me that Sebastian Moon, a stripling of such tender years that he can go about the place with long curls without causing mob violence, is in love with Clara Bow?"
"And has been for some little time, he gave me to understand, sir."
"Jeeves, this younger generation is hot stuff."
"Yes, sir."
"Were you like that in your day?"
"No, sir."
"Nor I, Jeeves. At the age of 14 I once wrote to Mary Lloyd for her autograph, but apart from that my private life could bear the strictest investigation. However, that is not the point. The point is, Jeeves, that once more I must pay you a marked tribute."
"Thank you very much, sir."
"Once more you have stepped forward like the great man you are, and spread sweetness and light in no uncertain measure."
"I am glad to have given satisfaction, sir. Would you be requiring my services any further?"
"You mean you wish to return to Bognor and its shrimps? Do so, Jeeves, and stay there another fortnight if you wish, and may success attend your net."
"Thank you very much, sir."
I eyed the man fixedly. His head stuck out at the back, and his eyes sparkled with the light of pure intelligence. "I am sorry for the shrimp that tries to pit its feeble cunning against you, Jeeves," I said. And I meant it. The end. I hope you enjoyed.
I hope you enjoyed the 13-year-olds have a crush on various actresses and so are being nice. Yeah, that is one of my favourites, just because I just love the responses to children behaving themselves. It's like, no, this isn't right. What's going on? Summer fun, indeed. But yes, I hope you all enjoyed. There are
Just he has a turn of phrase. These youth, not enough shenanigans. Exactly. He has a turn of phrase which I absolutely adore. But for that, we shall head to a break, and yeah, I shall come back, probably chatting a little bit more. Might read some more excerpts and things, and yeah. So go do break-related things, and we will be back in about 5 minutes. Bye for now.
return. Hello again. My voice is a little bit feeling the Bertram Wooster voice there. Oh yes, very, very nice. Yes. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed. That is one of my favourite of his short stories. There are numerous ones, and they all sort of, a lot of them have similar characters. Obviously, they've got Bertie and Jeeves and the aunts and things. They've got similar characters and things, but yeah, I do rather enjoy Wodehouse's turn of phrase. It feels like it's a very English thing, in terms of like the kind of humour, but I don't know. I'd be interested to see the Americans among you, whether it's kind of a kind of humour that you like / are used to, because it's kind of farce, but also, I don't know, there is that satirical element to it as well, which I really appreciate, because that was the thing with Tale of Two Cities, as we found with the whole courtroom scene. For those of you who have been catching up on have been keeping up with Tale of Two Cities, if you'll know what I mean. But this whole kind of absurdity of just all of this kind of all of the airs and graces that come with, in Wodehouse's case, the aristocracy; in Dickens's case, in this particular instance, in Tale of Two Cities, the absurdity found in formality. Thank you. Yes, there is this utterly absurd thing that we have, and does actually exist, of the formality of like the upper classes and stuff, and also just the absurdity of just the sheer amount of wealth there. It's like these people are literally betting other people. It's like, I'm betting my chef against your kitchen maid. It's like, hang on, and like the fact that that's a thing. I don't know if that is a thing Wodehouse ever encountered, but the fact that is, it is absurd, it is ridiculous, but there's also that level of, hang on a second, let's just take this back. It's like, you are betting actual people. You are betting their job security, basically. I mean, sure, they'll go from one job to another, but they might like it here. And this kind of, oh, these people are dispensable attitude that he is kind of making fun of in putting it in such an absurd setting in the first place, which I do appreciate. Wodehouse was very much, as he did have obviously this kind of baffled fondness for the sort of dying British aristocracy, because a lot of the characters in his books, and a lot of the sort of the upper class at the time, were actually like, they were very sort of land wealthy. A lot of them had these crumbling old estates that they had been given and passed down from generation to generation, but in terms of actual income and actual cash, they didn't have as much as they needed, basically, to keep this building from falling down. So it's this kind of it's this antiquity that we have in this country that we probably still do. I reckon we still do have a lot of people who sort of have generational wealth that isn't like, it's just wealth in a property, for example, but it's not like we have multiple properties. It's just we have this old crumbling manor house that is going to cost millions and millions of pounds to restore, or just keep up, or maybe demolish, but we probably can't demolish it because English Heritage or National Trust might have a say. So it's this kind of sort of, I guess, dying breed that he absolutely loved kind of exploring in his writing, and it's why I particularly like Wodehouse, because I think there's a lot to be there's a lot to be found underneath what appears to be just a very sort of silly, funny, farcical, over the top story. There are moments that you're like, that doesn't happen. That can't. That's absurd. And actually, then you stop and think about it. It's like, no, that probably did. That's troubling. Because he was, by all accounts, a nice chap and very much kind of someone who, I don't know, he was a fairly normal guy. Like he wasn't someone who had a massive estate or whatever, but he's coming at this from the perspective of from the perspective of not the characters that he's writing about. Like there are some stories that there are kind of more working class people in, and those people are just doing sensible common sense things, and there are these absolute buffoons who are the upper class, just bumbling around making mistakes left, right and centre, and all these normal people are like, what's going on? And the fact that kind of they're there as a foil to all these characters, it's like, oh, okay, I see what you're doing here. And like there's a story where I think one of possibly Bertie's uncle, I don't know, he has too many relatives, falls in love with a, oh god, I think is she an actress? She might be an actress, I'm not sure, like a music hall actress or something. And of course the entire family disapproves. No, can't have that. Oh, awful. Wrong class, wrong station, blah, 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 blah. And it all works out for the good, and he ends up with the woman he actually loves. And Bertie's basically just like, to hell with what the family think. You should be happy with the person you want to be with. And as a kind of statement is really lovely. It's lovely to have as a kind of backdrop to all of this absurdity. It's like, no, there are some genuine sentiments here. But yes, I'm also trying to find, there's a fantastic bit about a swan. So yeah, that bit in the story that was mentioned about someone being marooned on an island with a swan. I shall just read you. Actually, where is it? Yeah, so basically they are marooned on an island in the middle of a lake. Bertie is basically trying to save this guy who has been marooned by child, and he's brought a boat to the island and trying to find the guy, and they have just spotted each other, Bertie's just said hi. Literally, "Hi!" I shouted, waiting for a lull. He poked his head over the edge. "Hi!" he bellowed, looking in every direction but the right one, of course. "Hi! Hi! Hi! Hi!" "Oh!" he said, spotting me at last. "What-ho?" I replied, sort of clinching the thing. I suppose the conversation can't be said to have touched a frightfully high level up to this moment, but probably we should have got a good deal brainier very shortly. Only just then, at the very instant when I was getting ready to say something good, there was a hissing noise like a tyre bursting in a nest of cobras, and out of the bushes to my left there popped something so large and white and active that, thinking quicker than I have ever done in my puff, I rose like a rocketing pheasant, and, before I knew what I was doing, had begun to climb for life. Something slapped against the wall about an inch below my right ankle, and any doubts I may have had about remaining below vanished. The lad who bore mid snow and ice the banner with the strange device Excelsior was the model for Bertram. "Be careful," yipped the right on. I was. Whoever built the octagon might have constructed it especially for this sort of crisis.
Its walls had grooves at regular intervals which were just right for the hands and feet, and it wasn't very long before I was parked up on the roof beside the right-on, gazing down at one of the largest and shortest-tempered swans I had ever seen. It was standing below, stretching up a neck like a hosepipe, just where a bit of brick, judiciously bunged, would catch it amidships. I bunged the brick and scored a bullseye. The right-on didn't seem any too well pleased. "Don't tease it," he said. "It teased me," I said. The swan extended another 8 feet of neck and gave an imitation of steam escaping from a leaky pipe. The rain continued to lash down with what you might call indescribable fury, and I was sorry that in the agitation inseparable from shinning up a stone wall at practically a second's notice, I had dropped the raincoat which I had been bringing with me for my fellow rooster. For a moment I thought of offering him mine, but wiser counsels prevailed. And my favourite phrase there, the swan extended another 8 feet of neck and gave an imitation of steam escaping from a leaky pipe. It's like, okay, I know this is absurd. 8 feet of neck. And a noise like a tyre bursting in a nest of cobras. Just how do you make a phrase so over the top? The long swan, yeah, exactly. It's just great. It's just good stuff. But yeah, I just like a lot of his descriptors are very sort of Dickensian. One of my other favourite quotes of his: "The drowsy stillness of the afternoon was shattered by what sounded to his strained senses like G.K. Chesterton falling on a sheet of tin." Which is just... What? Sorry? What? Just the quotes... I don't understand where he got... Like, he is... I'd love to be able to write like Wodehouse. And this is where Pratchett absolutely, like, is on a par with just some of the phrases he uses as well. It's just like, oh, I wish I'd had this thought. And I know I must have said it before as well. The word gruntled didn't exist before Wodehouse used it in a book with the quote, "I could see that, if not actually disgruntled, he was far from being gruntled." It's just the use of language. This is the thing that I feel like comedy writers do maybe better than any other writer, is play with language. There is a sense of, especially with the stupidity of the English language, like we have so many subclauses and sub-subclauses and ridiculousnesses, and if you really play with that, you can have a lot of fun, and you can get comedy from the absurdity of the use of language, which I really, really like. And a quote that I kind of wish I remembered more often: "Why don't you get a haircut? You look like a chrysanthemum." It's like, okay, sure. Golf, like measles, should be caught young. Yeah. The fascination of shooting as a sport depends almost wholly on whether you are at the right or wrong end of the gun. Just, yeah. Mm-hmm. And yeah, like when P.G. Wodehouse was actually asked, like, about his writing and stuff, a couple of quotes that he apparently, "I just sit at a typewriter and curse a bit." It's just like, yep, every writer ever. And I know I was writing stories when I was 5. I don't know what I did before that. Just loafed, I suppose. It's just, he was just a man who... You do love how malleable the English language is. Yeah, that's the thing. It's like clay, isn't it? You can do a lot with it, and you can just string it out and string it out and string it out, and then either just not have a punchline, or just let it sort of peter out into existence, and the lack of a punchline is the punchline in itself. Or yeah,
You definitely read Wesley. Yeah, that. Oh God, I can't read apparently. Yeah, I would strongly advise reading some Wodehouse. It's not like Wodehouse and Pratchett. I think are the two people I have laughed out loud at, author-wise, when reading a book. But in general, they are the books that make you feel nice because they are, as I say, gentle little explorations into language. The plots are great, the plots are fun, but I think the real beauty and comedy of it is the use of language, and yeah, it's just it's just very, very good. I also quite like, at the age of 11 or thereabouts, women acquire a poise and an ability to handle difficult situations which a man, if he is lucky, manages to achieve somewhere in the later 70s. It's just like, yeah, you have a point there. He and again, like most of his female characters in his books are, well, apart from the occasional like deliberately kind of wishy-washy away with the fairies kind of woman, like again, they're all caricatures, but a lot of the women are like strong. Pratchett also packs an emotional punch. Yes, absolutely. That's the thing Wodehouse, I would say, lacks. Yeah, Wodehouse is very light entertainment. Oh, Douglas Adams, that's the other one. Yeah, very similar. Yeah, like Wodehouse is very much light entertainment. Pratchett has a little more heart, and I mean Pratchett does, I think, also because he is like creating a world. He is creating a world with characters that you really care about, whereas with Wodehouse it is just kind of a facsimile of our world, and these characters are just caricatures of people that you might meet at that time. So yeah, but yeah, no, I there are some characters. Aunt Dahlia is one of my favourite characters because she is just loud, and seems like a decent person, even though she is somewhat obsessed with betting and all of that. But one of the other sort of basically Bertie goes through lots of engagements with lots of women because they usually sort of press him into engagements. He goes, do you want to get married? And they're like, yes. And then they both realise that they are not in any way suited for each other. It's usually the woman realising that she's not in any way suited for, but Bertie isn't in any way suited for her because he's an absolute buffoon. But Honoria Glossop is one of the wonderful female characters, and it's just, the descriptions of her are always great. Honoria, you see, is one of those robust, dynamic girls with the muscles of a welterweight and a laugh like a squadron of cavalry charging over a tin bridge. A beastly thing to have to face over the breakfast table. Brainy, moreover. And I just love that basically all of the women, all of the strong women, Bertie just can't deal with because he, bless him, is just a disaster. And there's no kind of... It's refreshing for an author of that time and also writing about the stuff that he's writing about to be actually really quite like pro-woman and feminist. Like the women are in general in these books the ones who are actually sorting things out, apart from Jeeves. Obviously Jeeves is just his own thing, but yeah, and Bertie just kind of gets pushed around by all of them, not because they want to push him around, but because he doesn't really know what to do with himself. And he most of these women are about like 10 times more intelligent than him, and yeah, there is an appreciation for more than just one type of woman in a lot of his books. Like there are like all of the like, yeah, all of the women, all the female characters in his books have very distinct personalities, interests, characters, all of that, and it's really, really nice because so often in these kinds of stories it's woman falls in love with man. What's the woman like? She falls in love with man. Right. Is that her only personality, that she is the love interest? Yes.
whereas in this they are very much independent souls. And again, I feel like that's probably come out from Wodehouse's own life, and again he was absolutely devoted to his wife and his daughter as well. And at the British Library a little while back, they actually had on display some of his letters that he would write to both his wife and daughter, and they're just lovely. They're so lovely. He was so supportive and so just a nice guy. Not nice guy as in capital N capital G, but just seemed like a decent chap. Yeah. So I'm just looking more quotes. I hadn't the heart to touch my breakfast. I told Jeeves to drink it himself. Yes, Bertie definitely doesn't have an alcohol problem. It's all fine. It was one of those cases where you approve the broad, general principle of an idea, but can't help being in a bit of a twitter at the prospect of putting it into practical effect. I explained this to Jeeves, and he said much the same thing had bothered Hamlet. Which I rather like. Because there's a lot of very amusing like classical allusions in this as well, where Jeeves comes up with something that's actually intelligent and funny from a kind of from an I get the reference standpoint, and Bertie just completely glosses over it, and so you've got layers of comedy there from like, I get what this character's doing, and I get that Bertie just has not got a clue and is trying to work it out for himself. Yeah. And Douglas Adams, again, is a fantastic one to quote, isn't it? It's like, what was it? The ships hung in the sky in the same way that bricks don't. And just all of these kinds of phrases that just, they don't get old, because again, they are just playing with language. They're not relying on some kind of, they're not really relying on a punchline per se. They're not. I feel like it's something that you can do in prose writing, in books, in whatever, that you can't do so much with, like, for example, stand-up comedy or some kind of like spoken word comedy. It's much easier to lead someone on with a sentence, and then and then either disappoint them and leave them thinking, hang on a second, did I miss something there? Or just kind of lead them on this utterly bananas journey of, where is this sentence even going? But it's really delicious to read. One of Adam's quotes that stayed in your mind: in very deliberate, a cupful of liquid that's almost but not quite entirely unlike tea. Yes, I love that one as well. That's really good. A lot of the punchlines land in the same way, like missing a step when you're going up the stairs. Yeah, exactly. It's that kind of. Yeah, I guess a lot of the time as well, it's like you have to read the sentences. Obviously, you have to read the sentences beforehand, but like the setup is the joke in itself. You stumble. Hilary. Oh, you see, I haven't read any Hilary Mantel. I have all of the Wolf Hall trilogy, but I must read those. Like lemon cakes that are sour as a friar on a fast day. That's nice. Yeah, I like that. This is the thing. It's like it's finding similes that are just not quite what you're expecting. It's somewhat absurd similes. Yeah, I think both of my parents have read the Wolf Hall trilogies. Certainly my dad has, and he really enjoyed it. You stumble over the thing you expect to be there but isn't, and then go back to figure out what happened. Yeah, exactly. Which, obviously, when something is being delivered in a like spoken way, you can't then sort of go back. Which is one of the many wonderful things about the written word. But yeah, I feel like this is a very English thing.
or British thing at least. Because again, Hilary Mantel, British author? Yeah, she's British, isn't she? It's, yeah, and you go through, yeah, all of these different authors who have a very similar way of constructing sentences and playing around with language, and yeah, I love that way of writing. It's really, really great, and I find it very soothing to read as well. You really miss Thomas Cromwell's company when you finish them, but the language is wonderful too, and often very playful despite the serious subject matter. And nice. Okay. Yeah. See, I do want to read them, and yeah, like having that sort of juxtaposition, everybody's favourite word, between again comedy and tragedy. It makes it a lot, well, not tragedy necessarily, but seriousness and comedy is what makes. I don't know. It feels like you have a lot more to play with as a writer. You do think it is. Going back to Adams again, the first time you read The Hitchhiker's Guide, it was translated in French. Ah, and even that made your mind go. You can do that with words. Never encountered it before. Yeah. Well, that's the thing. It's. Well, I imagine it must be the case. French comic writing is often very cynical and has an undercurrent of nastiness. Yes, I totally agree. I have. Oh God, I saw Tartuffe by Molière. Is that Molière? I think that's Molière. Which is allegedly a farce. Play, obviously not book. Allegedly a farce, but there's some like proper cynicism and yeah, kind of nastiness in there. And I know Molière is kind of renowned for that particular brand of humour. Am I right in saying that kind of sardonic, kind of slightly twisted, sort of drawing the line between, I don't know, poking fun maybe and like cynicism. I don't know if I'm right in saying that, but that's I think what I've sort of been told and got the vibe. So it's really interesting that there is that difference. We've all got sort of different senses. He was a very, very cynical man himself. Yeah, I thought so. Yeah, it's very interesting that like comedy for every nation, for every culture, comes with a different set of boundaries, different set of rules, I guess. And it does feel that we love the language. Well, we writers, especially comic writers, adore the language, the English language, so much that they kind of just delve into that and go, what can we do with this? And just bask in the absurdity that this language is in the first place. And yeah, because I absolutely love it when authors do have a simile that has got nothing to do with the thing they're describing. Again, like Douglas Adams, hung in the sky, in the same way that bricks don't. Because it's like the same way that bricks. Where are you go? Okay, right, you're not going anywhere with this. Fair enough. Yep, that works. What happens when you can't think of you've put a word down already and you're like, I need to think of a simile for this. Oh, yeah, that works. Just do something that's completely unlike the thing that you are trying to describe. But yeah. But yes, I think I should probably be finishing up there, because I have a bit of a headache coming on. It is very humid because we were meant to have a storm. We've had some rain, haven't had a storm, and I could do with opening my door and windows a little bit more. So I will just have a look and see if there's anyone to raid. I assume Dave is still alive, maybe? Begone, foul vermin headache. Yeah, I know, right. Rude. Oh no, Dave's not live? Dave's still alive? Yeah. Wait, am I not following Dave? I must be following Dave. I am following Dave. Am I not following Dave? What? Apparently I don't follow I know I follow Dave. Unless I accidentally unfollowed him. I may have accidentally unfollowed him. Oh well. Unless Sam has any other suggestions of people that we can read. But I feel like Dave's raided us. We should probably return the favour. I'm waiting for a Sam response. Not with that accent, you don't. Well, okay, we'll raid over anyway. But yes, thank you all for being here for my just kind of enthusiastic chat about Wodehouse, because I just love the writing. It's just nice to read. Him and Dickens, like, they're my comfort writing, I find. But yeah, thank you all very much for being here. I hope you enjoyed. And we shall be back. Tomorrow, Sam will be reading some more short stories, as he usually does on a Saturday. And then Sunday, we shall be reading some plays and poems for your enjoyment at the earlier time of 3 p.m. BST. So I will throw you over to the Dave, who needs no introduction, because we all know Dave, and Dave is great. But yes, thank you all very much for being here. Go take care of yourselves, and yeah, we will see you back here tomorrow. Bye.